The mist clung to the Italian hills, softening the jagged outline of Monte Castello against the pale dawn. Footsteps echoed through the abandoned village streets. But these were not local peasants. They were soldiers from a land half a world away, Brazil, a country more known for its forests and carnival than its artillery, had sent its sons to fight on foreign soil. The green and yellow insignias on their worn uniforms fluttered in the chill morning wind as they adjusted rifles, checked maps, and whispered brief prayers. In the distance, the rumble of tanks and the staccato stutter of machine gun fire reminded them that war had no mercy. For months, these men had marched through unfamiliar terrain, battling not only the enemy, but the fatigue, the cold, and the weight of expectation. Yet, in the quiet before the storm, there was a moment of stillness, a shared breath, a glance between comrades, the unspoken understanding that they were part of something larger than themselves. History had largely forgotten them. But here, on this ridge, their courage would speak in the only language the battlefield truly understands. Action by 1942. The world had been engulfed in war for 3 relentless years. Europe was a continent scarred by blitzkriegs, bombed cities, and the shifting front lines of the Axis and Allied powers. The United States had just joined the conflict after Pearl Harbor, and the Allies were in desperate need of reinforcements to challenge entrenched German positions far across the Atlantic. Brazil had maintained a careful neutrality, watching the tides of war from its tropical shores. Yet, beneath this surface, political currents were shifting. President Getulio Vargas faced pressure both from the Axis sympathetic factions at home and the rising demand to support the Allies. German U-boat attacks on Brazilian shipping, sinking merchant vessels and killing civilians, hardened public opinion. The country that had once seemed distant from the conflict now felt its deadly reach. In response, Brazil declared war on Germany and Italy in August 1942, signaling the beginning of a bold and largely overlooked commitment, sending the Brazilian Expeditionary Force, the FEB, to fight in Europe. The FEB was no token force. Trained in the harsh backlands of Brazil and later in the rugged hills of southern Italy, these soldiers faced not only the enemy, but a battle against the unfamiliar. They had to adapt from tropical landscapes to frostbitten mountains, learning to operate with new weapons, vehicles, and tactics alongside seasoned Allied units. Logistics stretched across oceans, supply chains woven through continents, and a young army thrust into a theater far beyond its shores. Yet, amid these challenges, a sense of purpose grew. These men carried the weight of national pride, the hope of proving Brazil's mettle on the world stage, and the silent determination to show that a forgotten force could leave a lasting mark on history. As 1944 approached, the Brazilian Expeditionary Force began its journey across the Atlantic, a voyage that was both physical and symbolic. Over 25,000 men boarded ships in Rio de Janeiro and Santos, leaving behind families, cities, and the familiar rhythm of life in Brazil. The Atlantic was unforgiving. Storms battered decks, and the constant threat of German U-boats made every mile a test of nerves. For many, this crossing was the first confrontation with the scale and reality of the global conflict. They were no longer merely soldiers in training. They were an army at war, heading toward a continent where entire nations had already been scarred by years of fighting. Upon arrival in Italy, the FEB faced immediate challenges: language barriers, unfamiliar terrain, and the need to coordinate with American and British units tested their discipline and resolve. They were assigned to the U.S. Fifth Army under General Mark Clark, tasked with advancing along the Gothic Line, the German defensive stronghold cutting across northern Italy. Here, in the Apennine Mountains and the battered towns of the Italian countryside, the Brazilians would confront the reality of modern warfare. Fortified bunkers, relentless artillery, and an enemy adept at using every natural and man-made advantage. From the outset, the FEB demonstrated adaptability, courage, and an unyielding sense of duty. Their arrival marked not just another Allied reinforcement, but the first time a South American army engaged in combat on European soil during the war. The men of the FEB were ordinary Brazilians thrust into extraordinary circumstances. Farmers, factory workers, students, each carried a life left behind, a story rarely told beyond the barracks and battlefield. In the shadow of Monte Castello, they learned quickly that survival depended on trust, discipline, and the ability to act as one. Letters from home arrived sporadically, folded with care and soaked in longing, reminding them of what they fought for. Fear was ever present, but so was camaraderie. Shared meals by dim fires, whispered jokes in the trenches, and the quiet mourning of lost friends forged bonds stronger than steel. Many wrote in journals, capturing moments of beauty in the Italian hills, the eerie calm before artillery storms, and the first tentative smiles after a successful engagement. Through human resilience, the FEB transformed from a largely untested force into a unit capable of facing seasoned German divisions. On the tactical level, the FEB faced a steep learning curve. They adapted to Allied strategies, mastering combined arms operations that paired infantry, artillery, and armor in ways foreign to their previous experience. The Apennines demanded new maneuvers, assaults on fortified hilltops, navigating narrow valleys under fire, and coordinating with Allied engineers to breach obstacles. German defensive positions were relentless, often entrenched on ridges with overlapping fields of fire. Brazilian soldiers learned to rely on reconnaissance, surprise flanking attacks, and the careful timing of artillery barrages. Each skirmish honed their instincts. And over time, the FEB earned a reputation among Allied commanders as a reliable, determined, and disciplined fighting force. Capable of executing complex operations despite initial inexperience, technology, and equipment shaped every moment of the FEB's campaign. Brazilian soldiers were outfitted with a mixture of American and Brazilian gear. M1 Garand rifles, Browning machine guns, mortars, and artillery pieces that were foreign to most of them. Tanks and armored vehicles provided crucial support, though coordinating with these mechanized units required rapid adaptation. Engineers constructed makeshift bridges and cleared minefields, often under enemy fire, ensuring that the momentum of the advance was maintained. Supply lines stretched across mountains and valleys, and every ration, every shell, carried the weight of logistical ingenuity. Mastery over this machinery became as essential as courage, for it determined not just success in battle, but survival. The German forces, entrenched in northern Italy, presented a formidable enemy. Veteran divisions, skilled in defensive warfare, exploited the natural terrain, turning ridges and ravines into deadly kill zones. They relied on artillery, fortified bunkers, and coordinated counterattacks, testing the FEB's resolve at every turn. Yet, the Brazilians adapted, learning from each encounter, employing feints, night maneuvers, and coordinated assaults with Allied units to disrupt enemy positions. Leadership within the FEB also proved crucial. Commanders like General Zenobio da Costa and General Mascarenhas de Moraes guided their troops with a balance of discipline and empathy, earning respect in both victories and moments of retreat. Decisions made in the heat of combat often meant the difference between life and death. And the human element, the courage, fear, and determination of each soldier, remained central to every operation. The morning mist hung heavy over Monte Castello, concealing the enemy's trenches and bunkers. Brazilian soldiers moved silently through the rocky slopes, every footstep measured, every breath deliberate. Months of preparation had led to this moment. Artillery from Allied positions opened a rhythmic, deafening dialogue with German guns, shaking the ground beneath them. Scouts reported machine gun nests and minefields, and the FEB adjusted, flanking, crawling, advancing. Fear pressed against them like the cold wind, yet determination burned hotter. Each soldier understood that this assault was more than a tactical objective. It was proof that Brazil's commitment to the fight was real, tangible, unyielding. The first wave surged forward, facing barbed wire and enemy fire. Men fell, yet others pressed on, pulling comrades to safety, improvising paths through devastation. The battle tested every lesson learned, every bond forged in training and minor skirmishes. Here, in the Italian highlands, the FEB confronted the full force of modern warfare, and the outcome would etch their names, quietly but indelibly, into history. The assault stretched through days, each one a relentless grind of fire, smoke, and shifting lines. German defenders, dug deep into rocky fortifications, countered with artillery barrages and machine gun fire that tore through the morning fog. Brazilian units adapted, coordinating with American artillery to suppress enemy positions, exploiting weak points discovered during night patrols. Monte Castello became a crucible. Exhaustion, fear, and loss collided with courage, discipline, and unyielding resolve. Finally, after weeks of bitter combat, the FEB breached the last German defenses. Flags fluttered atop the ridge, the Brazilian green and yellow insignia standing as testament to a force long overlooked. Victory was not without cost, hundreds wounded, dozens lost. But the battle marked a turning point in the Italian campaign. The FEB had proven its capability, demonstrating that a South American army, thousands of miles from home, could stand toe-to-toe with the Axis in some of the most grueling terrain of the war. The smoke of Monte Castello still lingered over the hills as the Brazilian soldiers began the grim work of counting losses, tending wounds, and burying the dead. The victory was hard won, etched into the bodies and minds of every survivor. Over 25,000 men had served in the FEB, and though numbers alone could not measure their sacrifice, the tally of casualties was a stark reminder. More than 400 had fallen, over 2,000 were wounded, and countless others carried invisible scars. The towns they liberated bore the marks of relentless bombardment and years of occupation. And yet, amid the rubble, civilians emerged to witness soldiers who had come from a distant land to fight for a cause that was now theirs too. The impact of the FEB rippled beyond the battlefield, reinforcing the Allied effort in Italy and proving that Brazil's involvement in the war was both meaningful and decisive. Beyond immediate military gains, the presence of Brazilian troops reshaped the dynamics within the Allied command. Their persistence on the front lines allowed other units to advance strategically, relieving pressure on exhausted divisions and maintaining momentum against German positions. Reports from commanders praised the FEB's adaptability, discipline, and courage under fire. These soldiers had arrived as a largely untested force, but through relentless engagement, they earned recognition, slowly changing perceptions of Brazil on the international stage. The battles they fought were not widely known in the headlines of the era, yet each engagement chipped away at Axis resistance and reinforced the broader strategy of the Allies in Europe. As the Italian campaign drew to a close, the Brazilian Expeditionary Force had left an indelible mark on both the landscape and history. Towns and ridges once held by German forces now bore the signs of Allied occupation, with the FEB playing a central role in securing key positions like Montese and Colecchio. Soldiers returned home with medals and honors. But for many, the true weight of their experience would remain private, etched in memories of comrades lost, battles endured, and the shock of seeing the brutality of war up close. Their contributions, though vital, were largely overshadowed by the larger narratives of the European theater, leaving Brazil's efforts in relative obscurity for decades. Strategically, the FEB's campaigns helped pave the way for Allied advances in northern Italy, tying down German divisions and weakening the Axis's defensive grip. The integration of Brazilian forces into multinational operations demonstrated the Allies' growing reliance on diverse contingents, while also providing Brazil with its first taste of modern, large-scale warfare. The lessons learned would shape the country's military doctrine for years to come. Beyond the tactical and operational impact, the FEB's story served as a quiet testament to human resilience, courage, and adaptability. Soldiers who had once been ordinary civilians proved capable of extraordinary feats when faced with the unimaginable, leaving behind a legacy that demanded recognition, even if the world had initially forgotten their name. Long after the guns fell silent and the smoke cleared from the Italian hills, the men of the Brazilian Expeditionary Force returned home carrying more than medals. They carried memories of frostbitten nights, the deafening roar of artillery, and the faces of comrades who would never see Brazil again. Their journey had taken them across oceans and into battles few had imagined. And yet it was defined not just by bloodshed, but by resilience, honor, and the quiet courage of ordinary men confronting extraordinary circumstances. History may have overlooked them for decades, but their story endures in every ridge they captured, every life they saved, and every mark they left on the tapestry of the Second World War. In the shadows of forgotten battlefields, their legacy whispers a simple truth. Even the most distant nations can shape the course of global conflict, and even the forgotten can leave a permanent imprint on history.